The palace thought it had buried every secret but one letter, sealed away in Windsor's deepest vaults, cracked the monarchy open. The Queen's will wasn't just a formality, it was a final act of power. And Camilla, nowhere in sight. What did Elizabeth really think of her successor? And why did Charles act within hours of reading it? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It began as a quiet morning at Windsor, the kind the royal family preferred: routine, guarded and distant. But within the royal archives, deep behind velvet-draped walls and iron-reinforced doors, an archivist stumbled upon a sealed folder marked in the Queen's unmistakable hand. Its contents hadn't seen daylight since her passing. This wasn't an ordinary document, this was the posthumous will of Queen Elizabeth II. As procedure dictated, it was meant for the monarch's eyes only. What wasn't expected was the clause inside a coded and deliberate exclusion of Camilla from the list of royal successors and honours. Not a mention, not a gesture, just silence where Camilla's name should have been. The shock inside the palace was instant but silent. No formal meetings were called, no aides were notified. Charles received the document in isolation, behind locked doors at Balmoral, where he had retreated for solitude, ironically, the same place he once sought comfort during his youth. Aides later described him as pale, trembling, gripping the paper like a verdict. No one was allowed in. It was hours before he emerged, and when he did, he didn't speak to anyone, not even Camilla. The only instruction he gave was to secure the document and ensure no part of it reached the public. But the silence said everything. Something irreversible had shifted. Behind closed doors, whispers swirled like smoke. Was this a clerical oversight or a final blow from a monarch who had harbored private doubts? A former courtier, speaking anonymously, claimed the omission was no accident. The Queen chose her words carefully, they said. She always knew the power of what she didn't say. Camilla's name wasn't forgotten, it was rejected. And for Charles, that realization was not just devastating, it was defining. He had fought for decades to legitimize her place in the royal hierarchy. Now his own mother had undone it with a stroke of the pen. The tension didn't end with the will. The document fractured already fragile dynamics. Princess Anne reportedly demanded an emergency audience with Charles, pressing for clarity. Prince William, caught between filial loyalty and institutional preservation, grew cold and guarded. Trust began to erode, not just in Camilla's role but in Charles's judgment. No press release was issued, no official statement made. Yet the very walls of the palace seemed to pulse with anxiety. Staff walked with hushed tones, meetings were suddenly cancelled, and senior advisors began working in pairs, fearful of being scapegoated for what was clearly becoming a royal crisis. Behind the grandeur and ceremonial stoicism, the monarchy had entered dangerous waters. Elizabeth's death was meant to mark the beginning of a new era, but with this document, she'd reached from the grave and drawn a line in the sand. Camilla stood on one side, the future of the monarchy apparently on the other, but what began as a sealed document quickly ignited a chain reaction that neither Charles nor Camilla could contain. Camilla was ready to embrace her destiny, but destiny had other plans. In the wake of the Queen's will, she became a guest in a palace she once ruled. Stripped of responsibilities and frozen out of briefings, Camilla faced the unthinkable. A silent, systematic demotion, orchestrated by the man she once believed was her greatest ally, King Charles. The unraveling didn't begin with a royal decree or a thunderous public fallout. It began with silence. One by one, entries disappeared from Camilla's royal calendar. Engagements she had once championed, children's literacy programs, heritage tours, patron luncheons, were suddenly marked as postponed or delegated. No reasons were given, no apologies offered. Her team, confused and unsettled, received word from the private secretary's office that temporary adjustments were underway. In truth, these adjustments were anything but temporary. They were a carefully calculated dismantling of her public presence. The shift came without warning, but not without design. Camilla's closest aides were summoned separately, some informed that their roles had been absorbed by other departments, others told they were being rotated. No replacements were announced. No reinstatement plans discussed. The Queen Consort, was left without her inner circle, abandoned by the very system she had fought so long to be part of. Behind closed doors at Clarence House, the atmosphere shifted from regal command to cold uncertainty. Staff whispered of restructuring, but no one dared say the word that lingered on everyone's lips: demotion. What Camilla didn't know, at least not yet, was that duties once designated to her were already being handed out like quiet indictments. Princess Anne, resolute and uncompromising, stepped into a series of ceremonial roles Camilla once held. At the same time, Catherine began appearing at events previously under Camilla's patronage, welcomed not as a stand-in, but as a rightful successor. The shift was subtle, almost untraceable in official press releases, but glaringly obvious to those within the palace. It wasn't just a redistribution of tasks, it was a realignment of power. Camilla was no longer part of the equation. Then came the whispers, within court circles and among trusted press contacts. Rumours spilled Camilla had been removed from oversight of royal patronages. No official reason was ever disclosed, but sources pointed to a directive aligning with the late Queen's personal wishes. Camilla, already sidelined, was now officially toothless within the institution she had fought to lead. The Queen consort in name only, stripped of influence, purpose, and recognition. One emotional account emerged from a longtime staff member who found Camilla sitting alone in the drawing room at Clarence House. No tiara, no handlers, no shield of royal armour, just a woman betrayed by silence. She didn't speak, the staffer said. She just sat there, like she was waiting for someone to tell her it was all a mistake. But no one came. No apology, no explanation. And most damning of all, no word from Charles. The king, once her fiercest defender, now kept his distance. When questioned, he offered platitudes or diverted entirely. There was no press conference, no public reaffirmation of her role. In a monarchy where silence speaks louder than declarations, Charles's refusal to address her demotion was a message etched in stone. Camilla wasn't just being set aside, she was being erased from the palace's future plans. Behind palace walls, the Queen consort's silence was deafening, but the echoes of her exclusion were about to get louder. While Charles wavered, others acted. Princess Anne and Prince William had long harboured doubts, but now, with the Queen's will as their shield, they moved swiftly. What they did next rewrote the palace's chain of command and left Camilla's inner circle shattered in a single week. The silence from King Charles did more than isolate Camilla. It opened a door for others to walk through. Princess Anne, known for her steadfast loyalty to the crown's enduring legacy, made her position unmistakably clear. Invitations to strategy briefings that included Camilla were met with deliberate absence. Her refusal to engage wasn't born of emotion, it was a statement, plain and pointed. She cannot be trusted with the institution. Anne was overheard saying to a senior courtier. Those words didn't fall into a void. They landed at the feet of Prince William. Unlike his father, William did not hesitate. Acting swiftly, he arranged a private session at Kensington Palace with two critical figures, Anne and Catherine. Charles was not invited. For the first time since the Queen's passing, a strategic framework was drafted without the monarch's input. The meeting was brief, surgical, and quiet. In that moment, they stopped reacting and began reshaping. The goal was not revenge, but redirection. The Queen's will had spoken. Now, they would honour its silent command. What followed sent ripples through every corridor of power. A royal decree, unsigned by Charles, but fully enforced, ordered the removal of Camilla's emblem from a key Commonwealth office. The seal, once proudly displayed beside the king's own crest, was taken down without ceremony. Inquiries were met with rehearsed vagueness, but behind closed doors, there was no confusion. Camilla's influence was being peeled away, one layer at a time. Senior palace officials, sensing the shift, began recalibrating their loyalties. Departments that once deferred to Camilla's authority now directed their reports to Catherine. Meeting requests were rerouted, policy drafts renamed. Advisors who once briefed Camilla over morning tea now reported exclusively to the Princess of Wales. No public statement had been issued, but in the silence, a new order emerged. One aide confided, "You could feel it, the air had changed. Camilla was being replaced in real time, and everyone knew it. And then came the final confirmation. Catherine began receiving the intelligence briefings that had always gone to the Queen Consort. The transition was not announced, it was simply enacted. Overnight, she stepped into the role, not with pomp or ceremony, but with quiet command. The staff didn't question it. They adapted seamlessly, as if they'd been waiting for this moment to arrive. It wasn't rebellion, said one anonymous insider. It was restoration. The Queen's will had done more than disrupt it, had emboldened. In the face of indecision, a new structure had emerged, built not on Charles's approval, but on the institutional instinct for survival. The crown would not wait, not for comfort, not for tradition, not even for its king. Power, once concentrated in Camilla's hands, was flowing elsewhere, and those who once stood in her shadow now stood in command. But while alliances formed in shadows, the public was about to witness the first visible crack in the monarchy's golden facade. Every room in the palace tells a story, but one wall spoke volumes. In the royal gallery, Camilla's portrait had long held its place beside Charles. Until one morning, it didn't. Who ordered its removal? And what did the new portrait hung in its place reveal about the future of the crown? It happened without warning, without briefing, and without precedent. When senior aides entered the royal gallery at sunrise, they expected routine, a dusting, a check of lighting, a quiet preservation of history. Instead, they found absence. Camilla's portrait, which had stood proudly beside King Charles since the day of their coronation, was gone. No memo, no archival movement, no restoration notice. And in its place, a new portrait, striking, regal, and commanding of Catherine, Princess of Wales, hung without fanfare, without announcement, and yet with deafening intent. The gallery staff were instructed not to speak to press, not to confirm anything, and most certainly not to speculate. But they didn't have to. Within hours, the shift was noticed. Photos surfaced. Royal watchers sounded alarms. And then came the headlines, "Where is Camilla? Has Catherine been elevated? Gallery shake-up signals new power balance." The silence from Buckingham Palace only deepened the suspicion. No public explanation, no correction, not even the traditional no comment. Charles had vanished from public view for 2 days, and when he emerged, he avoided all cameras and refused every question. Royal insiders leaked what the palace would not. The decision had come swiftly, after an unrecorded meeting between William, Anne, and the private secretary. According to one source, the portrait swap was described internally as the beginning of public transition. Another added, "It was the final symbolic break." That wall spoke louder than any speech ever could. Within the monarchy, such visual cues are not cosmetic, they are constitutional code. Camilla's image, once declared inseparable from Charles's reign, had been removed from history's frame, and yet the man at the center of it all remained curiously silent. Charles, who had once fought battles personal and political to secure Camilla's place at his side, now found himself standing before Catherine's image. Behind-the-scenes footage, discreetly captured by palace surveillance, showed him lingering in the gallery for nearly 6 minutes, motionless. An aide later claimed the king whispered under his breath, "She was never meant to replace her," before walking away. It wasn't clear if he meant Catherine or Camilla or both. What was clear, however, was that the weight of the past was beginning to crush the present. To those within the institution, the portrait change was not merely an aesthetic alteration, it was an institutional redirection. Catherine's rise was no longer whispered, it was painted, framed, mounted, and Camilla, she was now history quietly removed, not disgraced, but displaced. This wasn't an official statement, it was something far more lasting, a visual revision of legacy, carved not in stone, but in canvas and silence. But this symbolic gesture was only the beginning. Next came the legal unraveling that left Camilla's position not just weakened, but revoked. A single signature changed everything. Drafted in utmost secrecy, a royal document surfaced that redrew the hierarchy of power. At its heart, King Charles, a pen, and a line that effectively erased Camilla from her highest role. But who pressured him to sign it, and what did it cost him? The document was never intended to see the light of day. It was written in the margins of crisis, behind the heavy doors of Marlborough House, during a midnight meeting that included only 3 individuals: the King, the Lord Chamberlain, and the private secretary. The wording was delicate, deliberately vague to the public, but searingly clear to those within. Camilla's role as Queen Consort would no longer hold constitutional weight. Her status, though respected in title, was now legally defined as ceremonial only. It was the monarchy's equivalent of exile, elegant, silent, and irreversible. Advisors were torn. Some warned that such a maneuver, especially so soon after the Queen's death, would spark constitutional uncertainty and public unrest. Others believed it was the only path forward. One senior official was blunt: either we honor the late Queen's will, or we risk discrediting the very institution we serve. The tension was unbearable. Heated debates flared in whispered conversations and hushed phone calls. Lines were drawn not between parties, but between loyalty and legacy. Prince William, though not present at the drafting, loomed large over its execution. Those close to him confirmed he made it known in no uncertain terms: the Queen's final wishes must be followed to the letter. Not just out of respect, but out of duty. William's message reached his father through back channels, and it landed with force. For Charles, the weight of that pressure combined with the silent expectation of the institution became impossible to bear. He agreed to sign, but on one condition: Camilla was not to be informed until after the document was filed. And so, in a room draped with tradition, but brimming with betrayal, Charles took the pen. He hesitated only once, his hand shaking, eyes heavy, but then he pressed ink to parchment. With that signature, he severed the official power of the woman he had spent decades defending. The fallout was swift. Courtiers who had stood by Camilla were either reassigned or dismissed entirely. Private arguments between Charles and longtime allies broke into full-scale confrontations. The palace entered lockdown mode, not publicly, but operationally. Communication was throttled. Leaks were monitored. Everything became about control. What made it worse, what made it unbearable, was the secrecy that followed. The document was quietly filed into the royal archives, its classification marked as sealed. Its existence, however, could not be hidden. Too many hands had passed it, too many whispers had spread, and while the public didn't know the words, they could feel the impact. Camilla vanished from key events. Her name stopped appearing in court briefings. She was being unmade from within, one procedural move at a time. Charles paid dearly for that moment. It wasn't just the price of silence, it was the fracture of trust between him and Camilla, between him and himself. In choosing the crown, he had chosen against the woman who once stood beside him through scandal, exile, and redemption. And though his name would never be attached to public blame, he would carry the burden in private, alone. And as the palace scrambled to contain the fallout, one voice rose from the past, echoing louder than ever. Buried deep within the will was a handwritten note, Elizabeth's final word. Unseen by the public, until now. What she wrote about Camilla stunned even her most loyal defenders. Was it regret? Was it warning? Or was it the monarchy's last true command? The note was folded tightly between the final pages of the Queen's official will, marked only with her personal cipher and a date that would become crucial just 3 weeks before her death. It wasn't addressed to any specific person, nor was it prepared as a formal instruction. But its tone, its purpose, and its consequences carried the weight of final judgment. In it, the Queen expressed grave concerns about Camilla's long-term influence on the monarchy. The words weren't cruel, but they were cutting. She wrote of loyalty, of lineage, and of legacy, and made it heartbreakingly clear that she feared Camilla's presence could disrupt the institution's future far more than ever imagined. The most haunting line read, "The legacy of the crown must pass through the Windsor line alone." That phrase, isolated and underlined, cut through generations of royal code. It wasn't just a preference, it was a directive, a veiled but deliberate exclusion. There would be no room for those outside the bloodline, no shared crowns, no equal reigns. Camilla, it seemed, had never truly earned the Queen's full blessing, and now, in her final breath, Elizabeth had made that silence permanent. But perhaps the most striking revelation was not what was omitted, but what was affirmed. The Queen explicitly named Catherine, Princess of Wales, as the woman who embodies the spirit of duty, endurance, and grace that must anchor the next generation. It was more than praise, it was coronation in prose, and for Camilla, it was devastation inked in the Queen's unmistakable hand. The palace kept the note sealed for as long as it could, but when word of its existence slipped into select diplomatic circles, the pressure to acknowledge digit became unbearable. Handwriting experts were brought in to confirm authenticity, not because there was doubt, but because there was fear. Every curve, every stroke matched decades of the Queen's correspondence. The note was real, and its implications irreversible. When Camilla was finally informed, she reportedly broke down in tears, collapsing into a chair in her private quarters at Clarence House. One attendant claimed she whispered, "After all these years, betrayal." It wasn't just about power, it was about trust, about having fought to belong, only to be written out at the end. The royal household scrambled to manage the fallout. Public statements were drafted and destroyed. Advisors debated whether the note should be acknowledged at all, but it was too late. The contents, though never officially released, had spread like wildfire among court insiders, diplomatic envoys, and eventually the media's most elite circles. Elizabeth's final words had become prophecy, and Camilla, once queen in title, now stood alone in the shadow of a monarch who had never truly let her in. With Elizabeth's words revealed, the nation demanded answers, and Camilla could no longer hide behind the palace walls. They called her queen, but she now sat alone. Friends distanced themselves, aides reassigned, and even Charles grew silent. Camilla's isolated hour had arrived, but as she withdrew from public life, whispers emerged of a plan to reclaim her relevance, no matter the cost. It began with a photograph, grainy and unconfirmed at first, but powerful enough to stir the press. Camilla, dressed plainly, was spotted leaving a royal estate alone. No convoy, no royal security, no protocol. A figure once shielded by the full force of monarchy now looked exposed, her departure from the estate silent, unceremonious and unguarded. Speculation ignited. Was she stepping away voluntarily, or had he been cast out from the inner sanctum she once called home? Inside the palace, changes were being made, but no announcements accompanied them. Camilla's name quietly disappeared from several ceremonial rosters. Upcoming events that once bore her patronage were now listed under Princess Catherine or Princess Anne. The transition was subtle but undeniable, designed not to embarrass, but to erase, and still, from Clarence House, there was no direct response. The silence from Charles, now palpable, echoed louder than any denial. Whispers suggested the king had distanced himself, not just politically, but emotionally. Reports surfaced of unanswered calls, cancelled dinners, and growing discomfort during official appearances. The man who once moved the earth for Camilla now seemed buried beneath it. But perhaps the deepest wound came not from the institution, but from the aristocracy that had once welcomed her as one of their own. Longtime friends, dinner companions, and confidants began fading from view. Invitations went unanswered, messages ignored. For them, association with Camilla had become a liability. They saw which way the wind was blowing, and in royal circles, loyalty is often eclipsed by survival. Alone in a world she once helped shape, Camilla found herself shrinking into silence. And then, something stirred. A vague and unorthodox message appeared through her spokesperson, one line, devoid of context, yet dripping with defiance. "History is not finished with me yet." No elaboration followed. No interviews. No press conference. But the meaning was clear. Camilla wasn't accepting exile without resistance. And soon after, another rumor exploded across the media landscape. Camilla had begun consulting with two close friends in publishing, not about an official biography, but about something far more personal, a memoir, not sanctioned, not approved, and certainly not filtered by the crown. Within days, the palace began reinforcing its media operations, rebriefing loyal journalists, and planting softer stories across royal outlets. Damage control had begun before damage had even struck. The very idea of Camilla telling her version of events raw, emotional, and off-script was enough to send shockwaves through every corner of the monarchy. Some dismissed it as desperation, others feared it as a final act of rebellion. But one thing was certain, Camilla was not done speaking. But even as Camilla faded into the margins, one woman's rise could no longer be denied. As Camilla's reign crumbled, another woman stood tall. Without fanfare, without force, Catherine claimed the future through poise, purpose, and a quiet but undeniable power. The Queen may have passed, but her legacy found a living vessel, and the people knew it. The shift didn't happen overnight, but when it came, it was unstoppable. As the public reeled from the revelations surrounding the Queen's will and Camilla's sudden disappearance from ceremonial life, one figure seemed to move forward, unshaken. Catherine, Princess of Wales, didn't demand attention, she earned it. In the weeks following Camilla's retreat, Catherine was photographed stepping into roles once dominated by the Queen consort. She attended military parades, presided over state dinners, and held court with foreign dignitaries. Each appearance was met not with scrutiny, but with admiration. The public, weary of scandal and second secrecy, found solace in her presence. Polls surged. A majority of the public now openly supported Catherine as the rightful future Queen consort. Even traditional royalists, once hesitant to embrace anyone outside the direct monarch sphere, began to acknowledge the inevitable. Headlines changed. "The future is Catherine," one paper read. Another simply declared, "Grace has a new face." It wasn't just about popularity. It was about trust. In a royal family fractured by history, Catherine had become the unifying thread. Inside the palace, her influence expanded. Long-term planning documents, once the exclusive domain of Camilla and Charles, now passed through Catherine's hands. Her vision began shaping future engagements, charitable priorities, even foreign tours. One senior advisor confessed that her notes were precise, focused, and quietly revolutionary. She wasn't just preparing for a ceremonial crown, she was redesigning the institution from within. And the endorsement that silenced any lingering doubt came from a source no one expected. In a rare public tribute, Princess Anne referred to Catherine as a pillar of strength, continuity, and quiet leadership. It was more than praise, it was validation from the monarchy's most seasoned warrior. Coming from Anne, who had always served the crown with a fierce sense of duty, the words carried more weight than any official declaration. In one sentence, Catherine had been ushered from support act to leading role. Even Prince William, usually restrained in public speech, began to shift his language. In an address to military veterans, he spoke of "my partner in service," a phrase historically reserved for reigning consorts. Observers noted it. Courtiers noticed even more. Behind the scenes, discussions intensified. Catherine's presence wasn't just filling a void, it was defining a new era. She had become, in many ways, what Elizabeth once was, a symbol of unwavering devotion, dignified resolve, and maternal grace in the eye of the storm. While Camilla faded into uncertainty, Catherine arose without confrontation. She never issued a statement, never addressed the rumors. She didn't need to. The monarchy had chosen its future not through scandal, but through strength, through silence, through the power of legacy, reborn in modern form. But behind every quiet rise comes a final reckoning, and Charles was not finished yet. Torn between love and legacy, Charles faced the most agonizing decision of his reign. Could he truly separate personal loyalty from royal destiny? In a private, final gesture sealed away from cameras, the king made his choice. And history once again turned on a quiet act of sacrifice. The room was silent, the air thick with consequences. Only a handful of senior royals were present, those whose names would shape the next era. Charles sat at the head of the table, a man not just crowned but burdened. The document before him was simple in form, but colossal in meaning. It was the final directive regarding succession protocols, one that would enshrine Catherine, Princess of Wales, as Queen Consort in waiting in all official and ceremonial processes moving forward. There were no speeches, no discussion, just a pen, a trembling hand, and a decision that marked the point of no return. Camilla was not in the room, nor was she informed until the document had been signed and sealed. In a gesture both cold and protective, Charles ensured she wouldn't witness her own removal in real time. What followed was a final offer, a hollow olive branch, an honorary title, a role with no power, no constitutional weight, no legacy. Camilla refused it. According to sources close to the situation, she saw it not as mercy, but as humiliation. Her answer was sharp and final. You can keep your paper cree. Own. Those close to the king would later say he didn't sleep that night. An aide described the sound of footsteps echoing through the halls of Balmoral, long past midnight. Charles, once steadfast in his defense of Camilla, had done the unthinkable not for scandal, not for image, but for the survival of the monarchy. He chose the crown, the aide whispered, and it broke him. Gone was the man who had fought for his second chance at love. In his place stood a monarch who had sacrificed the personal for the eternal. When the palace finally addressed the public, the language was carefully crafted. The decision was presented not as a removal, but a transition of stability. The statement praised Camilla's service, thanked her for her devotion, and framed Catherine's appointment as the natural evolution of Elizabeth's legacy. It was elegant, it was calculated, and it was final. Days later, a single image surfaced that captured everything words could not. Charles alone at Balmoral, staring out at the Scottish Highlands where his mother once walked. A man not victorious, but hollow. The monarchy had been preserved, the crown was safe, but the cost, measured not in scandal or policy, but in quiet, personal ruin. As the monarchy steadies its crown on new shoulders, one truth remains: power is never truly inherited. It is claimed, protected, and sometimes sacrificed for. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.